Hello, and welcome. Most of us picture the soaring stone arches and stained glass windows of the Middle Ages. But the true strength of these great buildings, their very skeleton, was not made of stone. It was a masterpiece of wood, crafted in the scent of sawdust and sweat by the patient hands of a master carpenter. Before we enter his workshop, if you enjoy what we do here, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I'd also love to know where you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights. Find your most comfortable position, and let's discover the reality behind this essential craft. Our story begins in the year of our Lord 1322, in a bustling town somewhere in the heart of England. The air hums with the sound of growth, the ringing of a blacksmith's hammer, the rumble of cartwheels on cobblestone, and the distant rhythmic chanting of masons setting stone for the new church spire. This is a world built by hand, a world of muscle, sweat, and a deep, intimate knowledge of natural materials. This is your world. Your name is Elias, and you are a master carpenter. Your hands are hard and calloused, your knuckles scarred from 1,000 slips of the chisel. But they are the most respected hands in this town. They can read the secrets in a piece of wood the way a priest reads Latin. Your workshop sits at the edge of town, a large timber-framed building with a high-peaked roof and wide doors that are always open to the air. The ground within is a soft, deep carpet of wood shavings and sawdust, decades in the making. The air you breathe every day is the finest perfume you know. The sharp, clean scent of freshly cut oak, the sweet aroma of pine resin, and the faint, earthy smell of the forest floor itself. This morning, the usual rhythm of your workshop, the steady rasp of a saw, the sharp thwack of a mallet on a chisel is paused. You stand before a long trestle table, your two apprentices, young Thomas and a quiet, sturdy boy named Will, standing silently behind you. On the table, held down by smooth river stones, is a large sheet of parchment. It is a drawing, an architectural plan for the new Merchant Guild Hall, a building meant to be the pride of the town. Your work, the work of the masons, the glazers, and the plasterers, will all come together to create it. But yours is the most fundamental. You are building the skeleton. Across the table from you stands Master Albrecht, the head of the Merchant Guild. He is a man accustomed to the soft feel of wool and the clink of coins. But he knows enough to respect the men who build his world. He points a plump finger at the drawing of the roof. The masons have reached the top of the walls. Master Elias, he says, his voice a low rumble. They will be ready for your timbers in 2 months. Must be a roof to inspire awe. The king himself may one day feast beneath it. You don't look at Master Albrecht. Your eyes are on the drawing. It shows a magnificent hammer beam roof, a complex and beautiful web of massive timbers designed to span the great hall without the need for central columns. It is an ambitious design, a puzzle of interlocking beams, braces, and trusses. It is a work of geometry and brute strength, and it will be your masterpiece. It is a strong design, you say, your voice rough, like wood itself. But its strength will come from the trees, not the drawing. It requires great oaks, perfect oaks, straight free of knots, made with a heart of iron. The guild has paid our lord for the rights to the best trees in his woods, Albrecht says, gesturing vaguely toward the hills outside the town. Take what you need. Be sure your work is as strong as your reputation. You simply nod. Your reputation is not built on words. It is built on the roofs that have weathered 100 storms, the doors that swing true after a lifetime of use, and the floors that do not creak under the weight of generations. The guildmaster leaves, and the workshop feels yours again. You roll up the precious parchment and place it in a wooden chest. "Thomas," you say, not turning around, "get the felling axes and the marking tools. We'll prepare the water skins and some bread and cheese." We go to the woods. The boys move with the quick, efficient energy of youth. You, however, move toward the back of the workshop to a heavy wooden rack where your personal tools are kept. You run your hand over the handle of your broad axe. The wood is dark and smooth, worn to a perfect, comfortable shape by your own grip. You test the edge with your thumb. It is sharp enough to shave with. This tool is an extension of your arm, of your will. It is the tool that finds the beam inside the tree. An hour later, you are leading your apprentices out of the town and onto the dirt track that winds up into the wooded hills. The air changes as you leave the cramped streets behind. The smell of wood smoke and tanneries gives way to the scent of damp earth and green growing things. You carry your broad axe over your shoulder, its weight familiar and comforting. The boys carry the heavier felling axes, saws, and provisions. You are entering the cathedral that matters most to you, the forest. This is your quarry, your library, your temple. You walk beneath the canopy of ancient oaks, beeches, and ash trees, their leaves dappling the sunlight on the path. You move with a quiet, observant grace, your eyes scanning everything. You are not just looking for big trees. You're looking for specific trees. A carpenter's relationship with a tree begins long before the axe ever touches its bark. It begins with an understanding of its life. You stop before a towering oak, a true giant of the woods. Thomas, eager to impress, steps forward. "This one is huge, master. It could make the main tie beam in a single piece." You shake your head without taking your eyes off the tree. "Look closer," you say. You point up to where a large branch was lost in a storm years ago. "See the way the bark has healed? That wound will have created a pocket of rot deep inside. And look at the base. See that fungus growing? The heart of this tree is soft. It has grandeur, but no strength. It is a king in decline. We need soldiers." You walk on, teaching as you go. You show them how to read the bark, looking for the tight, straight grain that indicates slow, strong growth. You show them how to spot the subtle spiral in a trunk that means the wood will twist as it dries. You show them a tree growing on a steep slope, explaining that its inner wood is under constant tension, making it unstable. You are looking for trees that grew in competition with others, forced to reach straight and true for the sunlight, their lower branches shed long ago, leaving a clean, straight trunk. You are looking for what you call maiden trees, oaks that have never been copyist or pollarded, their natural strength intact. Finally, in a small, sheltered valley where the soil is deep and rich, you find it. A stand of a dozen perfect oaks. They are not the very largest trees in the forest, but they are flawless. Their trunks rise for 50 feet before the first branches appear, straight as spear shafts. The bark is healthy, the leaves a deep, vibrant green. You walk around one of them, your hand resting on its rough bark, as if greeting an old friend. You can feel the life and power thrumming within it. "Here," you say, your voice filled with a quiet reverence. This is where we begin. You take out a small, sharp knife and a piece of chalk. On the trunk of the first oak, you carve the guild's mark, a simple set of interlocking circles. Then you chalk a clean white line around the base, a guide for the axe. This is the mark of death, but also the mark of rebirth. This tree's life as a living thing is about to end. Its life as the backbone of the most important building in town is about to begin. You step back and look up at the magnificent tree, at the way the light filters through its leaves. You offer a silent prayer of thanks to the tree for its life and its strength. Then you look to your apprentices. "All right, boys," you say, your tone shifting from reverence to command. "Let's give this giant a voice. You have chosen your tree. Now you must bring it to earth." This is not an act of brute force, but a calculated science, a dangerous dance that you must lead perfectly. A mistake here could not only ruin the precious timber, but it could also cost a life. An oak this size has its own mind, you tell your apprentices, your voice low and steady as you gesture towards the chalk line at the base of the trunk. It wants to fall where it wants to fall. Our job is to persuade it to fall where we want it to fall. You point to a small clearing downhill from the oak, a space free of other large trees or boulders. That is our bed. We will lay it down there as gently as a mother lays down a child. You take a felling axe from Thomas. It is heavier than your broad axe, with a narrower head designed for biting deep into the wood. We start with the mouth, you explain. You show them where to cut the deep, wedge-shaped notch on the side facing the clearing. This notch will act as a hinge guiding the tree's fall. This cut must be clean and level, but you will work from the right. Thomas, the left. I want to hear your axes strike as one. Find a rhythm. Let the weight of the axe do the work, not your back. The two boys take their positions. They're young and strong, full of a raw energy that you must now shape and direct. They swing their axes, and the first bites of steel into living wood ring out through the quiet forest. The sound is a sharp, resonant thwack, followed by the satisfying spray of pale, fragrant wood chips. At first, their rhythm is ragged, one axe striking just after the other. "Together," you command, your voice cutting through the noise. Listen to each other's tool. One breath, one swing. They adjust, and soon their axe blows fall into a steady, powerful rhythm. THWACK ... THWACK ... Thwack. It is the heartbeat of your craft. With each blow, the wedge-shaped mouth grows deeper, reaching toward the center of the tree. The air fills with the sharp, almost medicinal scent of fresh-cut oak. You watch their work, your eyes missing nothing, the angle of their blades, the way they stand, the efficiency of their swings. You offer small corrections, a word here, a gesture there, honing their raw strength into skilled labor. While they establish the rhythm on the front of the tree, you move to the back. You take your own axe, and with a different, more precise series of blows, you begin the felling cut. This is a single, straight cut, slightly higher than the point of the wedge on the other side. This is the cut that will sever the tree's connection to the earth. You do not cut deep yet. You are merely scoring the line, defining the final moment. The work is hard and repetitive. Sweat soon soaks the boys' linen tunics, plastering them to their backs. Sawdust clings to their damp hair and arms. They pause to rest, their breathing heavy, and you inspect their work. The notch is deep now, a gaping mouth in the base of the mighty trunk. "Good," you grunt, a rare but valued word of praise. Now we listen. You place your hand on the trunk of the tree, and the boys do the same. You close your eyes. You feel the deep, solid stillness of the wood, the silent power of a life that has spanned 300 years. But now, as the boys resume their chopping on the back cut, you begin to feel a change. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor travels up the trunk with each axe blow. The tree is beginning to feel the wound. The sound changes too. The clean thwack of the axes is now followed by a deeper, groaning sound from within the wood. The tree is beginning to speak. The fibers, under immense tension, are beginning to tear. This is the most dangerous time. Easy now, you say, your voice calm but charged with command. Slower swings, one at a time. You take over the final cuts yourself. The boys step back, their faces flushed with effort and anticipation. Your own swings are not powerful, but they are perfectly placed. You are not trying to conquer the tree. You are making the final, precise cuts that will allow it to surrender. Crack. The sound is sharp and sudden, like a lightning strike right beside you. A tremor shakes the ground beneath your feet. High above, the topmost leaves begin to tremble violently. You hear a deep tearing groan, the sound of a giant in agony. Back. You yell, and your apprentices scramble away to a safe distance. You look up. The great oak begins to lean, slowly at first, with an agonizing grace. The movement is almost imperceptible, and then it gathers speed. The sound of tearing wood intensifies into a deafening roar. The hinge you so carefully created is doing its work. The tree falls exactly where you intended, its massive trunk carving a majestic arc through the sky. It seems to hang in the air for an impossible moment, and in that moment, all the birds in the forest fall silent. Then, with a final explosive crack, it hits the ground. The impact is a physical blow you feel in your chest. The earth shudders. A shock wave of air and displaced leaves erupts from the clearing, washing over you. And then, silence. A silence more profound than before. A silence born from the absence of a giant. Where the magnificent oak once stood, there is now only a jagged stump and an empty patch of sky. You wait a moment, letting the forest settle. Hey. Then you walk forward into the clearing. The fallen tree lies before you, a magnificent ruin. The air is thick with the smell of its lifeblood, the scent of crushed ferns and split, green wood. You place your hand on the still warm trunk. The power is gone, but the strength remains. You inspect the wood. It is perfect. The grain is straight, the heartwood is solid pale gold. You have done your work well. The soldier has fallen, ready to be shaped, ready to serve. You look at the massive trunk, a fallen giant stretching over 100 feet along the forest floor. The journey of this tree is far from over. In truth, it has only just begun. The great oak lies on the forest floor, its stillness a stark contrast to the violent energy of its fall. The air around you is thick with its scent, a raw, green, and powerful perfume of life interrupted. For a long moment, you and your apprentices simply stand in the presence of this fallen giant, a shared, unspoken feeling of awe and responsibility settling upon you. This is no longer just a tree, it is timber. It is the raw material of your promise to the guild, the substance from which you will build your masterpiece. The moment of reverence passes, replaced by the instinct of the craftsman. There is work to be done, a great deal of it, before this massive log can even begin its journey to your workshop. All right, you say, your voice breaking the silence. Its branches are still reaching for the sky. Let's bring them down to earth. The first task is limbing the trunk. This is hard, strenuous work, but it is the first true act of shaping. You and the boys take up your axes and begin to methodically remove the massive branches that splay out from the main trunk. You start at the base and work your way up toward the crown. Each branch is a small tree in itself, thick and heavy. You attack them at the collar, the slightly swollen point where they join the trunk. Your axe blows precise and angled to sever the fibers cleanly. The forest, which had fallen silent, is now filled with a new cacophony of sound. The sharp ring of your axes, the cracking of wood, and the heavy crash of severed limbs falling to the forest floor. You work with a steady, relentless rhythm. Sweat drips from your brow and into your eyes, but you do not stop. You are a force of entropy and creation at once, dismantling the natural form of the tree to reveal the perfect, straight timber hidden within. You see in these branches not just waste, but a future. The larger, straighter limbs will be set aside. They can be used for smaller braces, for floor joists in a commoner's house, or for firewood to keep your own family warm through the winter. A good carpenter wastes nothing. Every piece of the tree has a purpose. It takes over an hour to strip the great trunk of its branches. When you are finished, it lies before you as a single, colossal log, its powerful form finally revealed. It is a pale, naked giant on a bed of its own green leaves. The real assessment can begin. You leave the boys to catch their breath and drink from the water skins. You, however, begin a slow, deliberate walk along the entire length of the log. You run your hand over its surface, feeling for the subtle bumps and hollows that tell the story of its growth. You are reading the log. Your eyes scan for any hidden flaws, a hint of rot, the telltale sign of a wood-boring insect, a cluster of knots that might create a weak point. You are like a physician examining a patient. You tap the wood with the handle of your axe, listening to the sound it makes. A solid, resonant thump tells you the heartwood is strong and sound. A duller, hollower sound would be a sign of decay, but this tree rings with the clear note of pure strength. You nod to yourself. Your choice was a good one. This tree is a soldier, through and through. Now you must decide how to divide it. The roof of the guild hall requires beams of specific lengths and thicknesses. You carry these dimensions not on parchment, but in your head. You pace out the lengths along the trunk, your worn leather boots marking the measures. You decide that the thickest part of the trunk, the first 50 feet, will be squared to make the two main tie beams, the foundational pieces of the entire roof structure. The upper, slightly thinner sections will be perfect for the principal rafters. You call over Thomas? They bring the chalk line. This is one of the most magical tools of your trade. It is a simple tool. A long, thin cord of tightly wound flax, rubbed with a lump of white chalk until it is coated in a fine powder. You hand one end of the cord to Will and tell him to hold it fast at the base of the log. We walk the length of the trunk, unreeling the line, pulling it taut over the rough, curved bark until you reach the point you measured. You and Will hold the line stretched tight, a perfect straight white line hovering just above the wood. Thomas steps to the middle, hooks 2 fingers under the cord, pulls it straight up, and lets it go. Snap. The sound is sharp and clean. The cord strikes the bark, leaving behind a perfectly straight, brilliantly white line against the dark, textured surface. You have just imposed the perfect geometry of the mind onto the imperfect, organic form of nature. You have turned a log into a diagram. You repeat the process 3 more times, creating 4 parallel lines that define the square beam that lies sleeping inside the round trunk. This is the guide for the sawyers and the hewers. There can be no mistakes. A wavy line here means a weak beam in the hall. This is only the first of the 12 great oaks you and your apprentices will fell and mark over the next week. Repeat the process on each one. a slow, methodical harvest of giants. The small valley, once a quiet home for these ancient trees, is transformed into a temporary open-air workshop filled with the ringing of axes and the shouts of men. At the end of the final day, you stand and survey your work. A dozen colossal, pale logs lie on the forest floor, each one marked with your clean white lines. They are no longer individual trees. They are a set. They are the components of a great wooden puzzle that you will assemble. The sun is low in the sky, its light filtering through the new gaps in the forest canopy, striping the logs with golden shadow. The hard physical work here is done. Soon, the sawyers will come with their great pit saws, and the teamsters with their oxen to begin the long, slow process of getting this timber out of the woods into your workshop. You gather your tools, the familiar weight of comfort in your tired arms. You look back one last time at the fallen soldiers, lying in wait. Your work in the forest is finished. The work of turning these raw materials into a masterpiece of engineering and art is about to begin. The next 2 weeks are filled with the sounds of straining oxen and shouting teamsters. One by one, the great oak logs complete their slow, ponderous journey from the forest valley to your sprawling yard next to the workshop. They arrive on massive two-wheeled carts, pulled by teams of 6, sometimes 8, oxen, their hooves, churning the earth into a muddy track. The ground shudders as each log is rolled off its cart, coming to rest with a deep, resonant thump that you feel in the soles of your feet. Soon your yard is no longer a simple workspace. It has become a boneyard of giants. A dozen colossal pale logs lie waiting. They're raw. Natural forms, a stark contrast to the neat stacks of finished planks and the ordered structure of your workshop. Looking at them, you feel the familiar mix of excitement and immense pressure. The Guildhall roof exists, for now, only in your mind and on a piece of parchment. Here, lying before you, is the raw substance of that dream. It is your job to release the perfect, geometric forms that you know are sleeping within these rough cylinders of wood. The first step is to raise a log from the dirt. You cannot work on a timber that is lying on the ground. You and your apprentices use long, stout levers of ash wood, wedging them under the log. With a series of coordinated grunts and heaves, you slowly and carefully roll the massive oak onto 2 smaller, shorter logs that act as skids, lifting it a foot or so off the ground. It is a battle of leverage and raw strength. Once the log is raised, you hammer heavy iron spikes called dogs into the skids in the log itself, locking it in place. It must not move, it must not roll. The work you are about to do requires a foundation as solid as the earth itself. Now, with the log secure, the true art begins. You must transform this round, tapering, imperfect log into a perfectly straight, perfectly square beam. This process is called hewing or squaring, and it is the foundational skill of your craft. It is a work done not with saws, but with the controlled and precise power of the axe. You begin, as you did in the forest, with the chalk line. But here in the yard, the precision must be absolute. You go to one end of the log and inspect the cross-section of the grain. With a compass and a square, you carefully chalk a perfect square onto the end of the log, ensuring the lines avoid the soft outer sapwood and contain only the strong, dense heartwood within. You do the same at the other end, a smaller square to account for the natural taper of the tree. These 2 squares, 50 feet apart, are your targets. They're the beginning and the end of the perfect beam you intend to create. Now you must connect them. You and Thomas once again stretch the chalk line. It's time from a corner of the square at one end to the corresponding corner on the other. Snap. The white line appears on the bark, a perfect, straight edge imposed upon the log's rough surface. You do this for all four corners, creating 4 parallel lines that run the entire length of the log. These lines define the waney edge, the first face of the squared beam you will hew. But a chalk line can be smudged, can be washed away by a sudden rain shower. You must make the lines permanent. You take up a smaller hand axe, and with a light controlled touch, you walk the length of the log, chopping a shallow groove directly over the chalk line. This is the hewing line. It is a definitive physical mark that cannot be erased. It is the boundary between the waste wood you will remove and the perfect timber you will leave behind. Your apprentices will chop and hew for hours, but their axes must never, ever cross this line you have just carved. You step back and look at your work. The great log is now a piece of geometry. It is marked and ready. The raw power of the forest has been measured and contained by the precise mind of the craftsman. Now you say to your apprentices who have been watching your every move, memorizing every step of the process, we give it a voice, but this time it will be a song of many notes. You hand them each a scoring axe. It is a different tool from the felling axe, lighter with a shorter handle, designed for making quick, deep cuts across the grain. You will score the length of the log, you instruct. It's pointing to the section of rounded wood between 2 of your hewing lines. This is the wood that must be removed. Your cut should be deep, a hand's width apart, but they must stop at the line, not a hair's breadth beyond it. This is a test of control, not just strength. Go. Thomas and Will take their positions on opposite sides of the log. They begin to swing, their axes biting into the wood, not with the grain, but against it. The sound is completely different from the felling in the forest. It is a sharp, staccato rhythm of constant chopping. Chop, chop, chop. Each blow severs the wood fibers. It's making the next stage of the work possible. They work their way down the length of the log, leaving a series of deep, parallel cuts in their wake. From the side, the log begins to look like a great wooden caterpillar, covered in a row of thick, uniform ridges. This is strenuous, repetitive work, and soon the 2 boys are drenched in sweat, their arms and backs aching. But they work on, their rhythm becoming a steady, percussive beat in the afternoon air. They are preparing the way for the master. They are preparing the way for the broad axe. The apprentices have finished their work. They stand back from the great log, leaning on their axes, their chests heaving with the effort. Where there was once a smooth, curved surface of bark, there is now a 50-foot row of deep, ragged cuts. They have done the brute work of scoring, of severing the long, stubborn fibers of the oak. They have prepared the battlefield. Now it is time for the general to command the field. You walk to the rack where your personal tools are kept and take down your broad axe. This is not the tool of a common laborer. It is the instrument of a master. The handle is long, carved from ash, and bent slightly to one side to protect your knuckles from scraping against the wood. The head is a massive asymmetrical slab of dark polished steel. One side is perfectly flat, the other beveled to a razor's edge. This axe is not designed to chop deep into the wood. It is designed to shear, to shave, to plane the wood with a precision that seems impossible for such a heavy tool. You have spent years sharpening it on a large, oiled whetstone, and its edge gleams with a deadly light. You approach the scored log. Your apprentices watch in silence. For them, this is the most important lesson, one that cannot be taught with words, only with observation. You take your stance, your feet planted firmly on the ground beside the log. You are not facing the wood head-on, but standing sideways to it, your body aligned with the length of the beam. This is the hewer's stance, a posture of balance and power. Your work begins where the boy's work ended. You must now knock off the chunks of wood they have defined with their scoring cuts. This is a process you call juggling, and it is a display of controlled force. You swing the broad axe, but not with the edge. Use the flat back of the axe head, the pole, striking each scored section of wood near its base. The sound is a deep, resonant thud, completely different from the sharp crack of the scoring axes. With each blow, a large chunk of oak, a jug splits away from the trunk along the grain, breaking off at the scoring line. Thud, crack, thud, crack. You work your way down the log, and in your wake you leave a trail of splintered, fist-sized chunks of wood on the ground. The log is now a rough, brutalized version of a square beam, surface a jagged landscape of broken wood, still far from the hewing line you so carefully marked. Now, the true art begins. You swap the axe to your other hand, the flat side of the blade now facing the log. You are going to use the razor-sharp edge. Your goal is to shave this jagged surface down to the clean, permanent line you scribed, creating a perfectly flat and surprisingly smooth face. You take a deep breath, and your body falls into a familiar rhythm. You swing the heavy broad axe, your arms, shoulders, and hips all moving in a single fluid motion. The axe moves parallel to the log, a sweeping horizontal arc. The gleaming edge shears into the wood, and the sound it makes is not a chop, but a long, satisfying shinning. It's like the sound of a giant blade being drawn from a scabbard. A wide, thin sheet of wood, a flitch, peels away from the log and curls at your feet. Where the jagged, broken wood was a moment ago, there is now a surface of pale, luminous oak, as smooth as if you had planed it. It is a work of incredible precision. You are taking off no more than a 1/4 inch of wood with each swing, but each swing covers a wide area. Your blade cuts right down to your scribed hewing line, but never touches it, never crosses it. To do so would be to mar the beam, to introduce a flaw that could never be erased. You work your way backwards down the length of the log, your body a machine of perfect repetition. Swing, shinning, step back. Swing, shinning, step back. The pile of fragrant, curling wood shavings grows around your ankles. The air is thick with the clean, almost sweet scent of the oak's heartwood. Your concentration is absolute. Your mind is not in the yard, with the sounds of the town drifting over the walls. Your mind is in the space between the axe's edge and the wood. You are feeling the grain, reading the timber with each swing, adjusting your power and angle for the slightest variation in the wood's density. It takes you nearly an hour to hew the entire 50-foot length. When you are done, you stand back, your own breathing now heavy with the sustained effort. The first side of the beam is complete. It is a marvel to behold. Perfectly flat, astonishingly smooth plane of pale gold wood now runs the length of the massive log. It gleams in the afternoon sun, a testament to the power of a sharp tool in a master's hand. It looks as if a giant had taken a log and sliced it cleanly in half with a divine knife. The most difficult part is over. First face establishes the true plane from which all other measurements will be taken. You have created order from the chaos of the raw log. You found the first side of the square that was hiding inside the tree. You run your calloused hand over the surface. It is smooth, with long, shallow facets left by the broad axe, a texture that is the signature of your craft. It is a surface that tells a story of skill and patience. There you say to your apprentices who have been watching, mesmerized, "That is one side of a beam. Now we turn it and find the next. One side is perfect. But a beam has 4 sides, and each one must be as true as the last. The great log, now half tamed with one flat face, must be turned. This is a task of immense effort, a slow and careful wrestling match with a giant. You call your apprentices over. The levers you say simply. They bring the long, heavy poles of seasoned ash. You jam the ends under the curved side of the log, using smaller blocks of wood as fulcrums. Together now you command. On my mark. You all put your weight on the levers, your muscles straining, your knuckles white. The log groans in protest. For a moment it resists, an object of immense inertia. Then slowly, agonizingly, it begins to move. It rolls with a deep, shuddering sound, the bark on the underside grinding against the skids. You and the boys work in a coordinated rhythm, heaving, repositioning the levers, heaving again. Finally, with a loud thump, the log settles, coming to rest on the perfectly flat hewn surface you just created. The most difficult part of the turn is done. The log now has a stable, flat base. Now, you must ensure the next face you hew is perfectly square to the first. This is where your most important tool of geometry comes into play, the framing square. It is a beautiful tool made not of metal, but of dark-aged oak. Its 2 arms joined with a perfect mortise and tenon joint. It is large, the long arm nearly the length of your own. You have tested its accuracy against the rising sun and the stars themselves. You trust it more than you trust your own eyes. You place the square on the end of the log, its one arm pressed flat against your newly hewn surface. The other arm now points straight up to the sky, a perfect right angle. You call Thomas over with a piece of chalk. Mark it, you say. Carefully draws a line along the upright arm of the square. You have just established true 90 degrees. You do the same at the other end of the log. Now, you connect these 2 marks with the chalk line. Snap anew. Perfectly straight white line appears along the top of the log's bark. This line is not just straight. It is a line of geometric truth. It is perfectly parallel to the bottom face and perfectly square to the one you have hewn. The entire process begins again. The apprentices take up their scoring axes, their blows now more confident, their rhythm more steady. They work their way down the log, making the deep preparatory cuts. It's always stopping just shy of your new chalk line. Chop, chop. The sound is the steady drumbeat of progress. When they are finished, you take up your broadaxe once more. You find your stance, your body settling into the familiar rocking rhythm. Swing, shinning, step back. The wide, curling flitches of wood fall at your feet. The second face of the beam is revealed. Another plane of pale, luminous oak, as perfect as the first. You repeat this process 2 more times. Roll the great beam, a little easier now that it has 2 flat sides. Set the square. Snap the line. The apprentices score the wood, and you follow with the patient, shaving cuts of your broadaxe. With the hewing of each new side, the log looks less like a tree and more like something born from a craftsman's mind. The wild organic shape is planed away, and the clean, strong geometric form within is revealed. Finally, late in the afternoon of the second day of this work, you make the last swing with your broadaxe. The final shaving of wood curls away, and falls onto the thick carpet of chips that now surrounds the beam. You step back, your arms and back burning with a familiar, satisfying ache. It is done. Where a rough, bark-covered log once lay, there is now a masterpiece of form and potential. It is a 50-foot-long beam of solid oak, a 1.5 feet square from end to end. Its 4 faces are flat and true, each one bearing the long, shallow, rhythmic marks of your axe. The grain of the wood flows down its length in beautiful, undulating lines of gold and pale brown. The corners are sharp and clean. It is an object of immense weight and almost perfect geometry, a testament to the power of simple tools and the knowledge of a master. You and your apprentices stand in silence for a moment, simply looking at what you have created. You have not made a piece of furniture or a pretty carving. You have made a bone for a building. You have forged a piece of the Guildhall's skeleton. It's a single beam, and the 11 others you will create from the other logs will one day hold up a roof under which the history of your town will be made. You run your hand over the surface one last time, feeling the texture, the strength, the very soul of the wood. The hard physical work of transformation is complete. You have brought the soldier from the forest and forged him into his armor. But the work is not over. This is just a beam, a single, silent piece of timber. It does not yet have a purpose. The next stage of the work will take place in the relative quiet of the workshop. It is a work not of sweat and brute force, but of quiet calculation, precise measurement, and the intricate secret art of the joiner. You must now cut the mortises and tenons that will allow this beam to lock together with its brothers, to become part of a whole far greater than itself. The air changes as you move from the yard into the vast open space of your workshop. Outside, under the open sky, the work was one of sweat, of the rhythmic impact of steel on wood, of wrestling with the immense weight and raw nature of the timber. Here, inside, the work becomes one of quiet and shadow, of careful thought and whispered measurements. The scent of raw green oak is replaced by the dry, sweet perfume of aged wood shavings and the faint, sharp smell of the grindstone. This is the mind of your operation. The yard is its muscle. The great beam you so painstakingly hewed now lies on rollers. And with the help of your apprentices and 2 hired laborers, you guide it through the wide doors and into the heart of the workshop. The floor here is not dirt or stone, but a vast, smooth platform of plaster, kept immaculately clean. This is your tracing floor, the most important surface in your world. It is a giant piece of parchment, a full-scale canvas upon which you will design and solve the geometric puzzles of the Guildhall roof before a single joint is ever cut. For a few days you do not touch the timber. You are no longer a hewer, you have become an architect. You unroll the small parchment drawing from the guildmaster, but you use it only as a reference, a suggestion. The true design will happen here, full size, on this floor. With a long straight-edged rule and a charcoal stick tied to the end of a string, you begin to draw. You work with the intense, silent focus of a monk illuminating a manuscript. Your movements are a strange and graceful dance of geometry. You create vast circles by holding one end of the string to the floor and arcing the charcoal around it. You find perfect right angles, not just with your square, but with the ancient secrets of rope and knots, using the 3-4-5 rule to create angles of impeccable truth. Slowly, over the course of a day, a web of white lines and arcs emerges on the dark plaster. To an outsider, it would look like a madman's diagram of the stars. But to you and to your apprentices who watch in reverent silence, it is the soul of the roof. You are drawing one of the main trusses at its true size. Each line represents the center of a massive beam. Each intersection represents a joint, a place where two or more timbers will meet and lock together, transforming individual pieces of wood into an unbreakable structure. This is the secret knowledge of your guild, a form of practical magic passed from master to apprentice for generations. You are not just a carpenter. You are a master of a secret geometry. Once the skeleton of the truss is drawn on the floor, you begin to give it flesh. Using your rules and squares, you draw the true thickness of each beam around the center lines. You are now looking at a life-size diagram of the great truss that will span the guild hall. You can see precisely how the main tie beam will connect to the principal rafters, and how the hammer beams will lock into the posts. Now, and only now, do you turn your attention back to the great oak beam lying silently at the edge of the floor. Its time has come. You and your apprentices roll the 50-foot timber directly onto the life-size drawing. You carefully align it with the diagram of the main tie beam, the foundational piece of the entire structure. The beam is now lying directly on top of its own ghost, its own future. The real work of the joiner can begin. You are no longer concerned with the whole beam, but with the specific points where it will connect to other timbers. These connections, the joints, are the secret language of your craft. You will not use iron nails or straps to hold this roof together. That is the work of common rights. You will join wood to wood, cut so perfectly that they will lock together for 1,000 years. You kneel on the beam, your knees cracking in protest after the long days of hewing. You bring out your finer tools, small, sharp marking knife, a pair of iron dividers, a mortise gauge, which is a tool with 2 sharp pins that can be set to scribe 2 perfectly parallel lines, and a heavy square-headed mallet made of dense beechwood, along with a set of razor-sharp chisels of varying widths. Your first task is to cut the great mortises that will accept the feet of the 2 principal rafters. A mortise is a rectangular hole, a socket that will receive a corresponding tongue of wood, which you call a tenon. Consult the drawing on the floor beneath you. Using a plumb bobbled weight on a string to transfer the exact location of the joint from the floor to the surface of the beam, you are transferring the geometric perfection of your drawing onto the physical reality of the timber. You use the marking knife and square to scribe the outlines of the mortise into the wood. The knife cuts the surface fibers cleanly, creating a guide for your chisel that is far more precise than any chalk line. Then, you set your mortise gauge to the required width and score the 2 parallel lines. The layout is complete. The boundary of the wood you must remove is defined with the precision of a surgeon. You call over young Will. The auger, you say? He brings a large T-shaped drill with a wide spiraled bit. This is the first step in removing the waste wood. Place the point of the auger inside your scribed lines and begin to turn, the heavy tool biting deep into the oak, pulling up thick, curling shavings. You drill a series of deep holes within the mortise, hogging out the bulk of the material. The heavy work is done. Now comes the work of the master's hand. You take your widest chisel and your mallet. You place the chisel's edge on the line you scribed, and you give it a sharp, confident blow with the mallet. The sound is a sharp, musical talk. The chisel shears through the remaining wood, its flat back following the guideline perfectly. You work from both sides, cleaning out the waste until the walls of the mortise are perfectly smooth and absolutely square. You check it with your square, ensuring it is true in all dimensions. It is a perfect, dark, rectangular void, waiting for its partner. You have cut the first two mortises into the great tie beam. These dark, perfect voids are an invitation, a question posed in the language of wood. Now you must craft the answer. You must shape the tenons on the principal rafters, the great angled beams that will rise to form the peak of the roof. Your apprentices help you roll another of the massive squared timbers onto the tracing floor, this one destined to be a rafter. You align it carefully with its own diagram, a long angled line on the plaster. The end of the rafter now lies directly over the spot where it will meet the tie beam. Once again, you use your plumb bob and marking knife to transfer the geometry from the floor to the timber. But this time, you are not marking a hole to be removed. You are marking the shape of a tongue to be left behind. Describe the shoulders of the ten and the lines where the wide face of the rafter will press against the tie beam. Then, you use your mortise gauge to mark the cheeks, the parallel lines that define the thickness of the tenon itself. The tenon must be a perfect, snug fit, not too tight to split the wood when it is driven home, and not so loose as to allow for any movement. Your entire roof will depend on the friction and fit of a few dozen of these joints. The layout is done. Now you need a different tool. Not the auger and chisel, but the saw. You call for your tenon saw. It is a beautiful instrument, a long, sharp blade held in tension in a sturdy wooden frame. This saw is your voice in a different dialect of the wood language, one that speaks of straight, clean cuts. Cutting a tenon by hand is a supreme test of skill. You must saw perfectly straight down, following two lines at once. Young Thomas stands at the far end of the timber, his eyes fixed on the line on his side, while you watch the line on yours. "Watch the line, Thomas," you murmur. "Don't just look at it. Split it with the blade." The line is your only guide. You take the first pull with the saw, creating a shallow groove, a kerf, to guide the rest of the cut. Then you settle into a long, smooth rhythm. The saw sings a high, sharp song as its teeth bite into the oak. ZZZT dash thump. Dot 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 ZZZT dash thump. Dot ZZZT thump. The forward stroke sings. The backward stroke clears the sawdust. You move your whole body, your arm and back working as one, the saw an extension of your will. You are not forcing the tool. You are guiding its path, letting its own weight and sharpness do the work. The scent of hot wood and steel fills the air around you. You make the two long cuts for the cheeks of the tenon. Then, with a smaller cross-cut saw, you cut in from the side to create the shoulder, releasing the waste wood. A block of oak falls to the floor with a solid thud. You are left with a perfect, clean-sided tongue of wood protruding from the end of the massive rafter. You take a wide chisel and pare the cheeks, shaving off impossibly thin layers until the surface is as smooth as sanded parchment. Now comes the moment of truth, the moment that quickens your pulse. No matter how many thousands of times you have done it, the test fit. You call your apprentices and the laborers. Gently now, you caution. Let the wood find its own way home. Together, you heave the massive rafter, walking it across the floor until the tenon at its end is hovering directly over the mortise in the great tie beam. The two pieces of your puzzle are about to meet. You guide the tenon into the mouth of the mortise. It slides in, snug and true. With a heavy commander, a giant wooden mallet wielded by two men, you give the end of the rafter a few gentle, persuasive blows. Thump. Thump. The sound is deep and solid. The tenon slides the last inch into the mortise, the shoulder of the joint meeting the face of the tie beam with a final, satisfying sigh of wood settling against wood. There is no gap. No sliver of light can be seen between the two great timbers. It is a perfect union. You run your hand over the joint, feeling the seamless transition from one beam to the other. This is the magic of your craft. You have joined two massive separate objects into one, using nothing but geometry and friction. But for the most important joints, a simple friction fit is not enough. You must lock them together, making them immovable. You now turn your attention to the most complex and critical joint in the entire design. It's the one that will connect the great vertical hammer post to the hammer beam itself. This joint will bear an incredible load. It must be perfect and it must be permanent. For this, you use a secret technique, the draw bore pin. After cutting another perfect mortise and tenon, you must drill the hole for the peg, the tree nail, that will lock it all together. You take a long-handled auger and drill a clean straight hole through the cheeks of the mortise. Then you insert the tenon and use the hole in the mortise as a guide to mark the position for the hole on the tenon itself. But you do not drill the hole in the same place. This is the secret. You pull the tenon back out. You drill the hole in the tenon, a fraction of an inch no more than the thickness of a worn silver coin closer to the shoulder. Now, when you reassemble the joint, the two holes are slightly out of alignment. You take a tree nail, a hard round peg of seasoned oak that you have carefully shaped on a shaving horse, and you sharpen its end to a slight point. You place this peg into the hole of the mortise, and you drive it home with a heavy mallet. As the peg is driven through, its tapered end finds the offset hole in the tenon. Because the hole is offset, the peg has to bend the wood fibers slightly, and in doing so, forcefully pulls the tenon deeper into the mortise, closing the shoulder of the joint with an immense, unshakable pressure. It is a built-in clamp, a permanent and powerful bond that will only grow tighter as the wood ages and shrinks. You drive the peg all the way through until its ends are flush with the sides of the beam. The joint is now locked. I can never pull apart. You have made a bond that will outlast you, that will outlast the memory of your name. It is a quiet, hidden act of perfection, a secret shared between you and the wood, a secret that will hold the great guild hall together against the storms and the slow, heavy weight of centuries. The first joint is locked, a perfect and permanent marriage of two massive timbers. But a roof truss is not made of two beams. It is a complex family of a dozen or more, each with its own role, each needing to be perfectly joined to its neighbors. The next few weeks are a quiet, patient, and methodical continuation of this first perfect act. You and your apprentices live on the tracing floor, your world defined by the white chalk lines beneath your feet. You move from one joint to the next, from one timber to another, repeating the same sacred process. You lay the timber on its diagram, you transfer the marks. You cut the mortises, first with the auger, then with the clean, sharp blows of the mallet and chisel. You shape the tenons. The long, smooth strokes of the frame saw a constant whispering song in the workshop. You craft the angled joints where the principal rafters meet at the peak of the roof, a complex bridle joint that must be perfect to bear the weight of the ridge beam. You shape the curved braces that will soften the angles and add strength. Their gentle arcs a pleasing contrast to the straight lines of the main beams. For each joint you perform the test fit, the gentle persuasion with the commander, and the final unshakable locking with a drawboard tree nail. Slowly, painstakingly, the individual pieces of the first great truss are completed. They lie scattered around the workshop, each one a masterpiece of joinery in its own right, but still silent, still separate. Then, the great day of assembly arrives. This is not the final raising at the Guildhall site, but a trial run, a dress rehearsal here on the safety and perfection of your tracing floor. You must assemble the entire truss flat on the ground to ensure that every one of the dozen joints you have so carefully crafted fits together in perfect harmony. A mistake of a quarter inch on a single tenon could throw off the geometry of the entire structure. You must know, here and now, that it is perfect. With your team of laborers, the slow, careful process of assembly begins. It is like waking a sleeping giant. You start with the great tie beam, the foundation. Then you raise the two principal rafters, their tenons sliding into the mortises at either end. You fit the great hammer posts, and then the hammer beams. Piece by piece, the web of timber grows. The sound in the workshop is not of cutting, but of the deep, solid thump of wood meeting wood, the sharp talk of mallets driving home the temporary pegs. By late afternoon, it is complete. The first of the 6 great trusses lies fully assembled on your workshop floor. It fills the entire space, a colossal 50-foot wide web of pale gold oak. It is a thing of breathtaking beauty and geometric perfection. The lines you drew on the floor weeks ago have sprung into 3-dimensional life, transformed into a massive, solid reality. You walk around it, your hand tracing the lines of the joints, feeling the immense latent power in its structure. There are no gaps. Every shoulder is tight. Every joint is true. It is perfect. But now, you must perform one last crucial task before you take it all apart again. You must give the pieces their names so they can find each other again. You take out a special tool, a race knife with a U-shaped blade. At each joint, you carve a set of matching marks, one on each of the connecting timbers. You use the simple straight lines of Roman numerals. At the first joint, you carve a single, clean eye into both the tie beam and the rafter. At the next, a 2 and then a 3. These are your carpenter's marks, or marriage marks. They are a secret code, an assembly instruction carved into the wood itself. When your crew is 50 feet in the air on top of the stone walls of the Guildhall, in the wind and the sun, there will be no time for guessing. They will simply have to match the numbers. The rafter marked 4 will go into the mortise marked 4. It is a simple, foolproof system that ensures this complex puzzle can be taken apart and put back together perfectly. Once every joint is marked, the sad and necessary work of disassembly begins. You carefully knock out the temporary pegs. Using levers, you gently persuade the perfect joints to come apart. The tenons slide from their mortises with a reluctant sigh of wood on wood. The great truss dissolves back into its constituent parts. The beautiful, unified whole becomes a collection of massive, silent timbers once more. You do not, however, stack them in a simple pile. You stack them in a precise order, an erection bundle, so that when you are on site, the first piece you need is on the top of the pile, and the last piece is at the bottom. Your work on the tracing floor is done. The geometry has been solved. The joints have been proven. The secret names have been carved. You look at the clean, empty space on the plaster floor where the great truss lay just an hour before. Then you look at the neat, ordered stack of marked timbers waiting by the great doors. The skeleton is ready. Quiet, contemplative work of the workshop is over. Now comes the noise, the danger, and the glory of the raising. The day of the raising dawns clear and bright, a good omen from God for weeks. Your workshop has been a place of quiet, intense focus, of whispered measurements, and the sharp, clean song of the chisel. Now, that quiet is shattered. The great doors of your workshop are thrown wide, and the ordered stacks of timber you so carefully prepared are being moved. The journey from your workshop to the Guildhall site is a short one, no more than a few hundred paces, but it is a journey between two different worlds. Your workshop is your kingdom, a space of control and precision. The construction site is a realm of controlled chaos. As your team of laborers, aided by oxen, begins to haul the massive timbers of the first truss, you leave your sanctuary and walk into the fray. The air at the site is different. It doesn't smell of clean sawdust, but of damp mortar, raw earth, and the sweat of 100 men. The dominant sound is not the whisper of a saw, but the loud rhythmic clink 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 of the mason's hammers on stone and the shouts of foremen. You are stepping onto a battlefield of construction, and today you are the general. You look up at the walls of the new Guildhall. They are magnificent, a testament to the mason's skill, rising 50 feet into the air. But they are incomplete. They are a great stone vessel waiting for its heart, a body waiting for its skeleton. The tops of the walls are a flat, empty promise, waiting for the roof you have spent months creating in your mind and on your floor. Your first task is to claim your ground. You direct your men where to place the timbers, laying them out on the ground in the exact orientation they will be assembled. Your erection bundle makes this easy, each piece coming off the pile in the order it is needed. Your apprentices, Thomas and Will, are with you, but their role has changed. They are no longer just learning. They are your lieutenants, directing the laborers, their voices carrying a new weight of authority. They have seen the magic on the tracing floor, and they understand the geometry that these common laborers do not. The most important tool for this new phase of work is already waiting for you. It looms over the site like a great skeletal beast. It is the treadwheel crane, or Magna Rata, the great wheel. It's a towering timber structure, a long, swinging arm reaching for the sky, with a massive hollow wooden wheel at its base. This is the engine that will lift your work from the earth to the heavens. It is powered not by animals, but by men walking inside the wheel, their slow, steady steps turning the great axle that winds the thick hoisting rope. It is a slow, ponderous, and incredibly powerful machine. You inspect its joints, its ropes, its pulley block. Your life and the lives of your men will depend on its strength. Now, on the ground, in the shadow of the great stone walls, you must reassemble the first truss one last time. This is not a test fit. This is the final, permanent assembly. You move with a calm, deliberate authority, directing your crew. The tie beam first, you call out. Lay it true. The massive 50-foot beam is settled onto blocks. Then comes the careful, coordinated effort of fitting the other pieces. The principal rafters, the hammer posts, the braces. As each tenon is guided into its mortise, you inspect the marriage marks you carved in the workshop. The 4 finds the 4, the V finds the V. Your secret language is now the clear, unambiguous command that brings order to this complex assembly. The joints slide together with the satisfying sigh of perfectly mated wood. But this time, they will not be taken apart. This time you lock them forever. Take your heaviest mallet and a basket of the hard, seasoned oak tree nails you prepared. At each joint, you find the pre-drilled offset holes. You place the tapered point of a tree nail into the hole. "Home," you say quietly. An apprentice takes a swing with a great beetle, a massive wooden mallet. THWACK. The sound is final and absolute. It is the sound of a lock turning for the last time. The drawbore pin does its hidden work, pulling the joint into an unbreakably tight embrace. You move from joint to joint, driving the pegs home, your team following your lead. THWACK, THWACK thwack. Each blow is a nail in the coffin of separation. The individual timbers are dying, and a new single entity, the truss, is being born. By midday, the work is done. The first great truss lies assembled on the ground, a 50-foot web of oak, its joints permanently locked. It is no longer a puzzle. It is a single, massive object, weighing several tons. It is ready to fly. A crowd has begun to gather. Townspeople, merchants, even off-duty masons, all drawn by the spectacle of the raising. This is a great event, a visible sign of the town's prosperity and your guild's power. The pressure is immense. Single mistake, a single snapping rope, would mean not just financial ruin, but public humiliation and the potential for death. You ignore the crowd. Your world shrinks to the truss, the crane, and your men. Supervise the attachment of the hoisting rope. Your best men climb onto the truss, wrapping the thick, heavy rope around the strongest points. Using thick pads of leather and sacking to prevent the rope from biting into the sharp corners of the wood. The ropes are attached to a massive pulley block, which in turn is hooked to the main line of the crane. Everything is ready. The truss lies tethered to the great machine. The men who will power the crane have climbed into the great wheel, their faces grim and focused. Your raising crew, each armed with a long pole with a spike on the end, raising pike stands ready to guide the beast as it rises. You walk the length of the truss one last time, checking every rope, every knot. You look up at the empty sky between the stone walls. Then you look at your foreman. You give a single, sharp nod. The foreman raises his hand. A hush falls over the crowd. "Heave," he bellows, his voice echoing off the stone. "Walk the wheel." Inside the great wheel, the men begin to walk. Slowly, deliberately, they trudge forward, their feet finding a rhythm. The great axle creaks in protest. The hoisting rope, which lay slack on the ground, snaps taut with a sound like a giant's bowstring. Raising has begun. The foreman's cry hangs in the air for a heartbeat, and then the world responds. From the heart of the great crane comes a deep groaning sound, the cry of a wooden giant waking from a long slumber. The axle, as thick as a man's chest, begins to turn with agonizing slowness. The great hoisting rope, which had been stretched taut, now begins to sing, a high, thin note of immense tension that cuts through all the other noise of the sight. It is the sound of a world held in suspense. Your eyes are fixed on the truss. For a long moment, nothing seems to happen. The men in the wheel are walking. The axle is turning, but the colossal web of oak on the ground remains motionless, an object of pure inertia, refusing to yield to the pull from above. A murmur of doubt ripples through the watching crowd. Then you see it. A shudder runs through the timber. The end of the tie beam lifts from its supporting block by no more than a finger's width, quivering in the air before settling back down. The crane groans louder. The rope sings a higher, more piercing note. And then it lifts. With a sound of tearing earth and splintering support blocks, the entire 50-foot truss shudders and rises from the ground. It does not float, lurches into the air, a captured beast fighting against its tether. Gaza, the initial lift is clumsy and terrifying. The truss swings wildly for a moment, a monstrous pendulum of oak and iron dogs, and a collective gasp rises from the crowd. The pikes, you roar, your voice cutting through the noise. Hold her steady, your raising crew springs into action. They are a small army of men, each armed with a long ash pole. They run under and alongside the swinging behemoth, a chaotic but coordinated dance of immense danger. They jam the ends of their pikes against the timber, their bodies braced, their muscles straining. They are not lifting, they are guiding. They push against the swing, they absorb its momentum, they gently and insistently persuade the tons of swinging oak back into a controlled line of ascent. You stand back from the immediate danger, but your mind is with them, your heart in your throat. This is where your geometry meets the unpredictable reality of wind and gravity. You're the still point in the center of this storm of activity, your eyes scanning everything at once. You watch the rope for any sign of fraying. You watch the crane's mast for any hint of splitting. You watch your men shouting orders, pointing, directing their efforts. Slowly, under the combined power of the crane and the steadying influence of the pike crew, the ascent becomes more graceful. Truss rises, clearing the heads of the men below, climbing steadily into the blue sky. It turns slowly as it rises, a majestic, silent pirouette. The marriage marks you carved in the workshop flashing in the sunlight. The higher it gets, the more vulnerable it seems. The wind, which was just a pleasant breeze on the ground, is stronger up there. It catches the flat sides of the truss, trying to push it into the unforgiving stone of the guild hall walls. Your men on the ground must constantly adjust, their pikes now almost useless as the truss rises out of their reach. The control is now in the hands of two men with long guide ropes attached to either end of the beam, and the men walking blindly in the great wheel. The truss rises past the level of the high scaffolding, past the faces of the masons who have paused their own work to watch yours. It shrinks in size but grows in stature, a perfect web of wood silhouetted against the sky. It is your design, your secret geometry, made manifest and given flight. A surge of pride swells in your chest, so powerful it almost chokes you. But it is immediately suppressed by a cold knot of fear. The most dangerous part is yet to come. It reaches the top. The foreman, perched precariously on the scaffolding 50 feet up, bellows a new command. Easy now. Slow the wheel. The walkers inside the crane slow their pace, their movements becoming careful and deliberate. The ascent of the truss slows to a crawl. It is now hanging level with the top of the stone walls, a few feet away. It must be brought in and lowered with absolute precision into the shallow pockets the masons have left in the stonework. This is the moment where the machine's brute force must yield to the master's eye. You leave the shouting to the foreman. You use your hands. You raise one hand, palm flat, a signal to hold. The wheel stops. The truss hangs, motionless, a few feet from its destination. You hold your breath. For a moment, the only sound is the creaking of the rope and the whisper of the wind. Then, using a series of sharp, clear hand signals that you and your foreman have used for years, you begin to direct the final placement. A small gesture to the left. The men with the guide ropes pull, and the massive truss slides sideways, slight circling motion of your finger. The walkers in the wheel take a single shuffling step, and the truss lowers by an inch. It is a slow, nerve-wracking process, a conversation conducted in silence across a 50-foot gap of empty air. The end of the great tie beam is now hovering directly over its stone pocket. Inches away. Just inches. You give the signal, a slow, downward motion of your hand. Inside the wheel, the men take a single, coordinated, shuffling step backward. The great axle groans, releasing a fraction of its tension. The truss descends, the last few inches seeming to take an eternity. Then contact. There is no violent crash, no splintering of wood. There is only a soft, deep, grinding sigh as the end of the great oak tie beam settles into the stone pocket that has been waiting for it. The sound is absorbed by the stone, a sound of homecoming. A moment later, 40 feet away, the other end of the beam finds its home with a similar, quiet finality. A cheer erupts from the crowd below, a wave of sound that washes up the stone walls. Your foreman grins, wiping a line of sweat from his brow with the back of a dirty hand. Your apprentices, Thomas and Will, look up from the ground with wide, shining eyes. Their faces a mixture of relief and pure awe, but you do not celebrate. Not yet. The truss is resting, but it is not yet anchored. A strong gust of wind could still shift it, could spell disaster. The pins. You shout up to the foreman, your voice steady. Secure it to the wall plates. Already prepared for this moment, your most experienced men, perched on the scaffolding, go to work. The masons have embedded a long, horizontal timber wall, plate into the top of the stone wall. Your truss now rests upon this plate, using a bow drill, a slow but powerful tool. Your men begin to drill down through the tie beam and deep into the wall plate below. It is a slow, squealing process. When the hole is deep enough, another man hammers a long, thick tree nail, a pin of solid oak down into the hole, physically wetting your timber frame to the stonework of the masons. They do this at 4 points, 2 on each side. The truss is no longer a separate object. It is now an integral part of the building itself. Only now is it truly safe. You finally allow yourself a deep breath, the cold knot of fear in your stomach finally unclenching. 1 down. 5 to go. The rest of the day and the days that follow fall into a new high-stakes rhythm. The crane becomes the center of your world. Out. Down on the ground, another great truss is assembled, its joints permanently pegged. The ropes are attached. The men walk the wheel. The great web of wood makes its majestic, terrifying ascent into the sky. Your pike crew guides it, your foreman shouts, and you, the still center of it all, direct its final delicate placement with your silent hand signals. Slowly, majestically, the roof takes shape. The second truss settles into place beside the first and then the third. With each one, the structure becomes stronger, the individual pieces lending their strength to the whole. You and your crew move between them on high, narrow scaffolding, laying the long purlins that connect one truss to another, creating a grid, a great wooden rib cage that arches over the vast empty hall. By the end of the second week, the last truss is locked into place. The main skeleton is complete. The crane is disassembled, its work done. For the first time, you walk the length of the structure you have built. You are 50 feet in the air, with nothing but your own joinery holding you up. You walk on the massive tie beams, your hand resting on the smooth, angled surfaces of the principal rafters that soar above your head. The light inside the hall is transformed. It is no longer an open-air space. The sun streams through the spaces between the timbers, striping the stone floor below with a complex pattern of light and shadow. You have created a new sky, a cathedral of oak. From here, you can see the whole town laid out before you like a map. You see the smoke rising from 100 hearths, the tiny figures of people moving through the market square, the green fields stretching out to the horizon. You have spent months with your head down, your eyes focused on a chalk line, a chisel's edge, a single joint. Now, for the first time, you look up and you see what you have truly been building, not just a roof, but a shelter for your community, a symbol of its wealth, a place where its future will be decided. The wood you shaped will be a silent witness to it all. The most dangerous and demanding part of your work is over. The roofers will come next, to lay the tiles and make it watertight. The glaziers will fit the windows, and the plasterers will cover the walls. But you have created the bones, the essential and invisible strength upon which all their work will rest. You stand there for a long time as the sun begins to set, the golden light catching the edges of the hammer beams and making the pale oak glow. A deep, quiet satisfaction settles into your soul, as solid and as true as the joints beneath your feet. Your work is good, your promise is kept, the skeleton is strong. Our journey with Elias the carpenter is now at an end. We have heard the ringing of the axe in the silent forest, smelled the sharp, clean scent of fresh-cut oak, and witnessed the slow, patient birth of a perfect joint. It was a world where a man's hands could read the soul of a tree, where geometry was a sacred secret, and where a roof was built to last for 1,000 years. That world of chalk lines, broad axes, and the slow, majestic raising of timber has now faded away, leaving only the quiet of the present moment. The carpenter's long and meticulous work is over, and now so is yours. There is nothing left to do but to rest, to let go of the day, and to drift into the deep and peaceful sleep that you deserve. Rest now. Sleep well.